Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. How are you liking the second book so far? Good, I hope. Hopefully we're enjoying it just as much as you enjoyed the first one. Go ahead and let me know down below how you're feeling about it and if you're liking it, and yeah, I'd love to have a discussion with you about the book. Alright, let's go ahead and get started for the chapters for today. It was 6 through 10, and yeah, let's get going and start our class. So let's go ahead and start with our traditional recap of what happened in these chapters. So we start with the captured portion of the group going to be taken to their holding cells and things like that. And they get rescued by a group of knights who had previously stolen Tass from when Tass was taken on their way to see the leader of Tarsus. I don't remember what title he had. Let me know down below if you remember. Or if you look it up and let me know. Tass is using these special seeing glasses that allow him to read the texts that the knights were trying to look at. And they discover the existence of the dragon orbs. And then Tarsus is attacked. So the portion of the group that was captured ends up being split up, and they all are trying to get back to the inn, but obviously they can't all make it together. They get separated. So Tanis is the only person that ends up getting to the inn and actually gets in the inn and tries to help them, only for the dragon to attack right when he comes in. And Lorana and Elistan are the only two that make it out of the inn. And the rest believe that Tanis and the others that were in the inn were killed. But they weren't killed thanks to Raistlin's magic, and they are rescued by Alhana Starbreeze, and with her griffins they take them to Sylvanisti, and they get caught up in a dream for fighting in the forest of Sylvanisti until finally all of them are killed during this dream and they wake up. Or at least Tanis wakes up. We don't know about everybody else at this point. We just know that Tanis woke up from the dream. Okay, so today I have quite a few different things to talk about. These chapters are pretty rich and have a lot of things going on for them. So I have quite a few things that I wanted to talk about, but I really narrowed it down so we have our normal amount of discussion. So anything that I don't cover or anything that you'd like a little bit more to be touched on a bit more, go ahead and comment down below at the end of the video if there's anything else that I didn't cover that you wished that I had, and I would love to have a discussion about it with you. So, first things first, because we're still kind of getting into this book, we have only read, let me see, at least in my copy, it's 119 pages out of 395. So we're still only not even quite a third of the way through. We're getting close to a third, but not quite. Yeah, it looks, when you look at it from the front, that's how I kind of judge my, a lot of times I judge how far I've gotten through when I look at the top here with the bookmark. Looks more like just a little bit more than a fourth of the way done. So we're still pretty on the beginning side of our story, so I still want to kind of talk about like how we're progressing from the first novel to the second novel, and what kind of things they are doing as the beginning of the novel, like kind of comparing the two beginnings, which we already see a big difference just because, yes, it is a second book, and so we're already in the story, we already know the characters somewhat, we already have prior knowledge that we didn't have in the first book for us to draw from in order for them not to be quite the same kind of beginning, because we don't have to go and cover all the very basics anymore. But we still have to do, even though it's a second novel, and even though we do have this prior knowledge, we still have to world build, especially at the beginning of the story. Not saying that we don't have to through the whole novel, because we really do. just as in the last story, we talked a lot about how things progress. But especially when we're getting back into the story, we have to remind ourselves of the world that we're in. So, yes, through the whole thing, but especially when you start off, especially through the first chunk, because we are presenting ourselves back to the story. And if you say you read it when it first came out, and then now that it's come out with the second one for when it was first published, you hadn't read it right before you read the second one like we have. So we kind of, as an author, has to re-submerge their readers back into the story and into the world. And so world building, again, is important to, one, remind us of where we're at, two, remind us of what kind of rules and things like that apply to this world and these characters. And then three, because we're going to new places and it's a new part of the story, we have to build and build and build, because as a world, just like our world in real life, it's complicated. It doesn't have just one or two things going on. There's a whole big world with different cultures and different things going on, different people and different things that change things depending on where you're at, like the environment and things like that. So we really have to continue to build as we go forward in the story, and especially as re-entering the story. So I have 4 different things that I thought were really world building in these chapters, like really kind of helped show where we're at and what kind of people live in this world, and what people expect in this world. So the first thing I noticed was the Kinder's nature. So you might wonder how Kinder's nature is building a world. And it's because we don't have Kinder in our own society. That's the first thing, is we don't have Kinder in our own society. So it's building a whole new species, I guess you could say, because we don't know normally how they would act or not act without the authors telling us. And we have, through repetition, as well as the author letting us know, or the narrator letting us know, this is a typical Kinder trait, or saying most Kinders are not allowed or not liked because of such and such, that we are building this species, I guess you could say. I don't know another word, or this race of people. I'm not sure, because Kinders aren't totally human. I don't know. Let me know what you think that they would be called down below, like what kind of specification they'd be under. But anyway, since we don't have them, it is world building because we are building what kind of people and characters and species and races and different things live in this world. So building on the Kinder's nature and saying, hey, this is a common trait, as well as character building for tasks, it's letting us build the world that these people live in, that is existing, that we're reading of right now. So I'm going to backtrack just a little bit into chapter 4 or 5 from the previous section, as well as bring in stuff from chapter 6 for this example. So sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit. Let me really quick double check what it is in chapters 4 or 5 that I was thinking of talking about. It's from the moment that they're going to see the Tarsus leader, that the Kinder task is doing something that mentions like it's all Kinder or whatever. Sorry, I should look this up beforehand. I'm not totally prepared today now, am I? Okay, here we go. The Kinders have unendearing character. Okay, so besides being quite casual in respect to other people's property, Kinders have another unendearing characteristic known as the taunt. All Kinders possess this talent to a greater or lesser degree. It is how their diminutive race, oh, so it is a race, has manage to thrive and survive in a world of knights and warriors, trolls, and hobgoblins. The taunt is the ability to insult an enemy and work him into such a fever pitch of rage that he loses his head and begins fighting wildly and erratically. Tas was a master at the taunt, though he rarely found a need to use it when traveling with his warrior friends. But Tas decided to take full advantage of this opportunity. So there we go. We have this whole thing where it even describes that this is a kindred trait. So, and that was chapter 5. So it was just the last chapter that we had assigned for last week. So we've got the taunt going, and we're building the world for this race of beings that are in there. And then, as we kind of already know, in chapter 6, we learn about Tas's seeing glasses, though we don't totally know where he got them. Except for I do think there was a kind of... maybe there was or wasn't. Maybe I'm thinking about something else. But wasn't there a mention of him taking somebody's glasses in the first book? I thought there was. But maybe I'm just nuts. Go ahead and comment and let me know if I'm nuts or not. Okay. Anyway, he has these glasses and he found them somewhere, which is also another part of the kindred trait, as we've seen before, is that he is constantly borrowing people's property and holding it for safekeeping, even though really he just took it and it happened to be in his pouch. Or at least according to him, it just happened to be in his pouch. Because he would never say that he steals anything. He just holds on to it for people. Or happens to find it in there. He doesn't know how it got there. So, as we see how Tanis interacts with the fact that Tas has these glasses that he knows were technically stolen. We are building more of the Kinder's nature and the race as a whole, and so we are building the world of like, hey, this is the kind of people that live here, as well as, like we said, character building for Tas. Okay, so the next thing that I noticed that was world building was the Griffins, where the Griffins come and defeat the Draconians that are shifting through the rubble and save the companions that were trapped in the inn, and they take them to Sylvanesti. So, again, it is important to know the kind of creatures that are in a world. What kind of creatures live there, and what do they do, and how are they interacting with other creatures and the humans and races of the world. So with the Griffins, it's interesting because they were not scared of the dragons. They weren't scared of the Draconians. They just beat them to a pulp, flying, like, whatever. Who cares that there's fire-breathing dragons around? It's not a big deal. But they are afraid of the Sylvanesti woods and would not go any further. So we do have this kind of building of not only the creatures, but also the world of like, hey, it must be really terrible, whatever's happening with Sylvanesti, if the Griffins are no longer going to be loyal. Not necessarily not loyal, but not fill exactly what their master wants them to by going all the way up to the castle and dropping them off instead. Kind of like with the unicorns, or Pegasus that flew them to, I was flying them to Tarsus, Zaxpazara, there we go. Whew, so many names to, like, get around. And then they ended up stopping by the Quishu because the dragons had burned the whole place to the ground, and they didn't want to go any further into the evil. So it's that kind of thing. It's the same kind of idea as those Pegasus, that we see the creature, we see what they're capable of, and even the author says, hey, they're known, or at least the author lets us through Tanis know that these creatures are normally very loyal and will do whatever the Sylvanesti royalty want them to because they have gained their trust. But it's too much even for them, even though they just previously ripped up a bunch of Draconians. So it builds not only the character, but it also builds the concept of how bad things are. So it's a dual purpose on that one. The next one is history/lore of the dragon orbs. So you kind of think probably that this is just part of the story, but every single culture, every single type of world, everything has a history, and it's usually got some kind of lore or mythology or something that is said in stories and passed on to other generations, either as warnings, as storytelling, or as just stuff that was passed on because it's important to know. Anything like that is a big part of a culture and a world, just like we have many different types of religions and mythologies and folklore and history and all this stuff, and it's passed on. That's the same kind of thing that we're doing with Raistlin. So even though it is important to know the knowledge of the dragon orbs and that voice that speaks through Raistlin tells him everything that he knows, but it's also like a history lesson or like a storytelling moment where they're saying like, this is how it came to be, this is how the dragon orbs were made, and this is what happened to them, and this is it's kind of, in a way, it is kind of set as a lore kind of story or a myth, but it's more of a history. So we kind of get both from it. It's kind of like, oh, this is what is known, but nobody knows about it. But really, this this voice does know it. So it is a part of history. It's actually something that happened. But either way, like I was saying, with all those kind of things, that is an important thing for a world, for a culture, for people, for our knowledge of this world, to understand like, hey, this is what's possible. This is what kind of world we're in. This is the kind of history that has made it so that way the world is the way it is today. So it's important to know, yes, what they're looking for, but also building the world and its history, because every world has history. And I know I'm saying any world, like there's more than one world, but I just mean like our world has history, and anything that a writer writes is going to have history, whether it's the same as ours because it's based off of the real world, or a different one for any kind of urban fantasy or high fantasy. So yeah, it's a big portion of making this world feel realistic, making it feel like it's actually a place that people live in. Okay, and then the last one is prejudice. Especially, we see it in these chapters with Tanis being taunted for being half human because Alhana talks to him about his half-human nature. The knights talk about him being half human. Everyone kind of brings up the half-human, half-elf portion of Tanis and is prejudiced against him for that reason. And we get prejudice from Alhana, with Alhana being prejudiced against anybody that's not Sylvanisty. Even the Quellanisty elves, she's very prejudiced against. She's very much like, oh, well, you guys must be barbarians because you don't know certain things. Or very hostile to Tanis, even about his elven half heritage. She's instantly like, if you're not Sylvanisty, you aren't good, especially if you're human. So, despite what happens between her and Strum, she basically doesn't accept that she actually felt like Strum was a very amazing human being and was worthy of not being prejudiced against, because she is so struck in her prejudices. As well as we get a little bit of the coming back from Riverwind, because before he was always cautious around elves, and the elves and Tanis being half-elf in the group, he barely got to trust any of them. But then Alhana comes up with her snotty know-it-all, you guys are all stupid and I don't acknowledge any of you kind of attitude, and that prejudice is brought back up to the surface, and he no longer wants to have anything to do with Alhana, and is not prejudiced against the ones that he, like Tanis and Lorana and Gilthanas, the elves that he has learned to trust, but is not having any good thoughts or any good interactions with Alhana because he sees her prejudice and he is not okay with it. So we see it really building back up. We see the prejudice coming back, and prejudice is a big thing for any world. Just as we have prejudice in our real life, when you're talking about a world that we are building, you have to have these kind of prejudices in order to understand people and to understand their interactions between the different races. So it's really building up the world, really building up the ideas that different people have. People like the elves, people like the barbarians, people like the knights. And so as part of a culture, prejudices against other cultures is something that very naturally happens. And so it is incorporated into this world, and we start to feel like, again, it makes it part of... I feel like I'm just not speaking very well today. I'm so sorry. Makes it seem like a real world because we have these real world elements that are brought in and are very obvious about, hey, this is the way things are, and this is why people are reacting these different ways. I'm sorry, did any of that whole section come out okay? Let me know if you have any questions down below, or if you need me to re-explain in a different way the things that I have talked about. Whew. Okay, let's go ahead and start on the next topic. So the next thing I want to talk about is also based off of it being kind of the beginning of the book. Not saying that we couldn't talk about this in the middle or the end of the book, but especially at the beginning, because this is the my topic is about tone and the feeling of the story. So we're kind of comparing it from book 1 to then here's book 2, and what is the tone of the story? How are we coming into the story? And the tone that we establish has been continuing to run through it. So we talked a little bit about tone and about the feel of the story last episode, but this episode I really want to talk about how you can really see the main tone for this book right now in these chapters, especially. Like, it's really clear the difference between the first book and the second book, and what kind of feeling we're supposed to get while we read it. So the first book, though bad things are happening, it's not really a depressing, sad, despairing book at all. It's more like an adventure story, where we see our group go through these adventures and trying to get these answers. And yes, there is danger, but it's not like they're depressed. They're more like, let's do what we gotta do and help the world as we can, because we're kind of being forced in the middle of this. This story has a very dark tone. Very dark, depressing winter, because we are in winter nights, which winter is supposed to be cold and dark and depressing kind of time of the year, other than Christmas, of course. And then nights are dark and cold times of the day. So we've got like a double connotation of like dark and depressing, and no good happens in these times, especially at night when all the bad stuff is supposed to happen in the world. We've got, that's like the tone of the title, tone of the season, because before we were in autumn, where autumn's where you are not necessarily full of life, that's spring, but like autumn is like where you harvest, and we're setting up for the winter. So it's kind of like a setup, and we can see that in the tone, the setting up of the adventure, and then bam, now we're in the cold, dark, wet portion of the storyline, and this book definitely has that tone for us. We see it in the details of the story, and the fact that like they're separated. The group is breaking and falling apart. We see that the half the group thinks that the other half is dead, so we have split them up with taking them only half of them hostage. Then when they're attacked, they're all discombobulated. Everyone is everywhere. Tass is pinned under that beam, and Tanis goes in only for the in to break and supposedly kill half of the group, and so because of that they leave that half, and Elhana does save the other half, but now the group is separated and broken down. It's falling apart. The Sylvanisti was supposed to be beautiful, beautiful nature and trees and things that they cultivated to be as beautiful and perfect as possible, that people would come to and marvel at. Kind of as like a tourist thing. You go and you're like, dang, this thing is great. But now all the trees are twisted and dead and look like they're from a horror movie. Look just like awful, completely twisted on its nature. And we have this horrible dream where basically everybody dies except for like 2 people. Tanis doesn't totally die and Raistlin doesn't die. Everybody else in that dream dies. So yes, it is a dream. Though we don't totally know if everybody wakes up. We only know that Tanis wakes up. And we probably know that Raistlin's gonna wake up because he knew it was a dream to begin with. So Raistlin was the only one really in control in that dream. So other than those 2 people at this point, it could all really be dead. Though it is unlikely since we do have more to the book. But it's a terrible ordeal. It's all depressing, sad, hopeless. The whole dream, everybody is just like, there is no way to survive. It's clear, super clear, that they are outnumbered, that they cannot win, that people are dying left and right, and there's no hope of saving anybody. They can't even save each other. Nothing is good. Everything is dead and dying and destroyed and dark and cold and wet and horrible. So we really see in the events, in the descriptions of the atmosphere, of the locations, things like that, everything is terrible and depressing and sad, and everything is falling apart. At this point, everything is falling apart. So the tone of the story is really much darker than the first one. Let's hope that as we move toward the 3rd book, things will start looking up. We'll have to see and find out, but right now we are at the low point, and the tone of the book fits that low point. It's really trying to send home, there we go, that this part of the story is meant to be depressing, and things are not going to be going well for a while. Okay, now let's go ahead and on that dark note, as we talked a little bit about the dream itself, we're going to go ahead and talk about the dream a bit more as our next topic. The first thing I want to talk about for the dream, there's 2 different things I kind of want to work on, is the writing of it, first of all. Especially for you writers out there, this is why I'm going to be talking about it, is because the writing I felt like was extraordinary on this section. The authors really give you the idea that everything is discombobulated, that you don't know where you're at, you don't know what's happening, you don't really know if it's a dream or not. Even though, yes, like I said before, we got plenty of more book to go. You really don't know if it's a dream or not. You don't know if the people are dying and is real. You feel the loss and the despair of everybody dying. You don't, even now, until we continue reading, or unless you already read ahead for next week, you don't know that anybody but Tanis and Raistlin survive. Because everyone else could be dead, and that could be where he's going it alone, or he's going to go find the rest of the group that wasn't in Sylvanisti. Or, you don't know. I mean, maybe Sylvanisti, because all the other characters that were there that weren't in Sylvanisti, maybe everyone experienced the dream, and the people who aren't in Sylvanisti are dead too. And it's really up to Raistlin and Tanis, and the world's going to heck. We don't know at this point. And especially when the dream first starts, it has like that break in the page where it seems like Tanis is falling asleep and he's falling over, and you're not sure what happens, and then all of a sudden, bam! He's wide awake. He wasn't waking up. He was already awake. And everything is going on, everything is discombobulated, being attacked left and right, like, it's just everywhere. Just going between character to character to character in these short little spurts, you're just like, what is happening? Everyone is dying, like, everything is terrible and going down the drain. Now, another thing that I think is amazing is because we are talking about a dream, the way it starts, where you're like, already in the middle of it, is just how most dreams happen, where you're already in the middle of a dream and you have prior knowledge for your dream to not be confused about where you're at. You're like, it's like you have started from the beginning of a dream, but really you're experiencing it from the middle. And so that's exactly what happens with Tanis. And that is part of the reason why you're just like, wait, what's going on? And then Raistlin says it's a dream, and then you're still the whole time the same way with Tanis, like, is this really a dream? I mean, you're hoping that it is, because you're like, I'm hoping everybody's not dead, because otherwise the story's coming to an end real quick. But just, at least for me, just like Tanis, even though I've read it several times, I'm still like, is this really a dream? Are we sure? Because it seems really real, just like Tanis keeps saying, especially with Tanis keep thinking, it's a dream, it's a dream, it's a dream, just wake up, and you don't wake up. So it does make it a little bit doubtful that it actually is a dream, because you know it's a dream and you're trying to wake yourself up and it's not working. And so you're like, oh, well, maybe it's not really a dream because I can't seem to wake myself up. And you think that if it was a dream, and I know it's a dream, I could wake myself up. Until the end of that chapter. Then we're finally like, okay, it actually was a dream. He did wake himself up. Now the question is, did anybody else survive the dream? Because Raistlin did mention that if you don't figure it out in time, you will just be dead. Such a cheery thought. You know, that tone, just so bright and cheery, just like I mentioned a second ago. So, let me know what you guys thought of the dream sequence. Let me know what you thought of the battles and all of that, and how you thought the writing was. Were you lost in it? Were you panicking along with Tanis and the others? Because I know for sure that I did. Okay. Now for this I'm going to have to probably reference my notes a little bit, so if I'm looking down a lot, that's why. The thing I want to talk about next for the dream is about the true nature of these characters. Because I believe that this dream really brought home the true nature of the characters that of the different companions. I feel like this really showed their inner personality, their inner person for every single one of them. Do you think the dream reflected the true natures of these characters? Please let me know down below what you think, because I really feel like it did. And I'm going to go ahead and show you all the things that I thought about as we went along with the dream. Especially because I know some of the sections were short and sweet. Not sweet, but they were really short paragraphs of like, okay, this is what happened and now they're dead. Especially in the beginning with like Riverwind and Goldmoon and Flint. They all had these little short, quick sequences, other than a couple of the characters that managed to survive a bit longer. So, let's go ahead and take a look at each of the different characters and see if you agree with me or not. But I really do believe that we get a really good look at the hearts of these characters through this dream. So, the first one who dies, pretty sure, I didn't go right through the book to make sure I was checking my facts on this when I wrote my notes up. But I'm pretty sure the first person to die is Riverwind, which is pretty sad. Because Riverwind's a really good fighter. So it's sad that he's the first to go. But I feel like it would kind of be sad for anyone to be the first to go. But, I mean, Tika lasts for quite a while when she's not a fighter. So, like I said, kind of sad that Riverwind's the first one to go. But he dies because of Quishu warriors. Not the elves that were attacking before, but because a giant band of Quishu warriors comes out of the forest and kills him, blaming him for bringing the blue crystal staff to their village. And so for that, I feel like is because his true nature is he feels the guilt of basically killing his village. At least he sees it as killing his own village by bringing the blue crystal staff to their mist. And so that's really like the heart of Riverwind, is that he feels that he has betrayed his people and that he deserves to die from them because he brought the blue crystal staff to their village. Now, I know this is not the next person that we talk about in the story and the next person to die, but the next person that kind of goes along with Riverwind is Goldmoon. And Goldmoon, we really see her true nature is that she hears that he's died. She goes, sees that he's dead, and she is killed because she is too busy grieving over Riverwind, which is just like her because she is not a fighter at all. She is a healer, and she's trying to heal the man that she loves, her husband, and feels like her faith is failing her during this dream. And so she is surrounded by the elves and killed because she is too busy grieving and trying to save Riverwind, which, in my opinion, is just like what she would do and is just her pure of heart of trying to save somebody and dying because of that, especially somebody who is important to her. Next person, or kind of pair that kind of go together, is Flint. He dies because of old age. Because he has lost his glasses and his joints aren't working right, and is then killed because he can't see what he's doing or where he's going or where he's walking in the way of. Which is very typical of Flint, because even though Flint wants to save everyone, he's got this huge heart and he loves Tanis and Tass, even though he won't admit about Tass. And Caramon and Strum, he really cares about all his friends and is protective of them, but he is getting old. Especially, we've mentioned this in the first book, toward the beginning, when they mentioned that Tanis and Flint had been together for a long time, but Flint's getting up there in years, as dwarves go. So, we already talked about how he needs he doesn't really talk about glasses needing it, but he does talk about needing his, joints to be rested because he's kind of getting arthritis and things like that in his joints, and they're not working quite as well as he would like. He's a little bit slower than he would be normally and things like that. So Flint dies because of that, which I think is his fear, is to get too old to fight and to die and let his friends down. Tika then kills him, which I think is very, very sad. Again, part of it is because Flint is unable to see without glasses and things like that, and runs into Tika, and Tika's just killing everything. So it is really sad that Tika is the one that kills him, but it also doesn't stop Tika from then having to keep fighting for her life. And Tika dies because she is just an unexperienced fighter trying to fight off all these people, and she's just blindly trying to kill anything that moves. But eventually it overwhelms her, and I feel like that is... I think she's the one that has the least amount of showing her true self in the fact of she's not a fighter. And so it's fairly easy to see how she would be overwhelmed and killed. But she does last quite a while because she is very stubborn, and she does try her best, and she's just going for it. But that also is part of the true nature of why she killed Flint. I feel like that's really what shows the true nature, is that she is a sad part of her killing Flint, because she isn't a fighter. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's just trying to stay alive, and that when push comes to shove, all she's going to care about is trying to kill anything that moves. Not even considering who she's stabbing or what's going on. She's just blindly trying to survive and trying to make it so that way she will be able to continue fighting the next person. So she's just stabbing. And so that's kind of her true nature, that it's kind of shown here, is that when push comes to shove, nobody's safe from her, so get out of the way, because she's just going to try and survive. And that means killing anything and everything in her path, because she does not know how to do otherwise. She doesn't know how to fight well enough to be able to pay attention to her surroundings and to fight with the tenacity that she needs. Next is Tass. He dies right before Tika, And it's very, very fitting. Tass, I find, death is very fitting for him because he's not a fighter, true, so I mean, he could have died based on somebody killing him, but he goes up to this tower, and there's that lock, which we all know that kinders in all shapes and sizes, but especially Tass, are great at picking locks, great at going to places they're not supposed to be, and that's kind of like their goal in life, is to go anywhere that they're not supposed to be. So he's picking this lock. It should have been easy. Should have been something that he would not set the trap on. He would be able to unlock it without setting off any trap, without breaking a sweat even. But here he is panicking because Tika is about to be killed. And what stands between her and death is him getting this door open. And so he, even though he has no fear of death and of the creatures behind him, he wants to try and save Tika, and so he is panicking a little bit, not afraid in the general sense of fear, but just fear of Tika dying, because he cares about his friend, and it's kind of all on him to get her to safety, and so he fails, and not only does he take longer to unlock it than he should have, he also springs the trap and is poisoned to death, picking his beloved lock. So that, I think, is a true sense of the Kinder and the fact that he's not afraid to die. He's not afraid of anything. He doesn't have... his adventures are great, like, you know, things like that. Like, he doesn't have any of the normal weaknesses that everybody else does, but he dies doing something that should be so simple and so heartwarming to him. He loves picking locks. So to die from something that he is normally really good at and loves doing is kind of fitting. Then we've got Laurana and Kitty. Sorry. I jumped a couple people. We got Caramon. And this again makes me realize that Raistlin is not the only person I don't totally get. A lot of times I don't get Caramon either when it comes to his brother. Because Caramon dies because his brother leaves him for dead. And basically is like, good riddance, I don't need you anymore, sucker. Go die and have a nice afterlife. And yet Caramon then, right before he dies, says, look after Raistlin for me because I won't be around. And I'm just like Strum and Tannis, like, mind blown. He leaves you here to die, and you're still saying to protect him. You're still saying to look after him. You're still saying that he is the world. And it just reminds me that I don't get Caramon and his relationship with his brother. I love Caramon, and in many other aspects, I totally get him. But in this case, I'm just like, dude, you need priorities. And that should not be the priority, especially when your brother basically kills you and never shows respect to you and basically treats you like you're trash. And now you're dead, but you're still caring about him when he basically told you, I'm perfectly fine with you dying. And that, I think, is the true nature of Caramon, because not only from other books that I have read, like the series after these three books is The Test of Time, The Test of the Twins, and that shows a lot about Raistlin and Caramon, and so yes, I do think that Raistlin is Caramon's heart and soul. I do think that is a very accurate portrayal, and I think even from all the readers who are just read up to what we've got right now, you can actually see that, yep, Caramon only cares about his brother above all things, and so that is a very fitting kind of true nature for him to have. Next is Strum fighting the dragon, and that seems, not only is that very knightly to do, to go slay the dragon, but also very typical of Strum, because Strum cannot let go of his knightly honors and his beliefs and his strong independent spirit. So I feel like he goes out exactly like he would, how his true nature would demand him to go out in battle, calling forth that he is going to fight to the death. And then Laurana and Kitiara are together in the fact that Laurana dies protecting Strum's body. So obviously, even though he's dead, she jumps in the way of the Draconian that comes to slash up his body, and she jumps in the way, and she's like, "You're gonna fight me, and this is not acceptable. I'm not gonna let you touch my friend any more than you already have." And that is very much a Laurana thing to do. She's very much about other people. She's very much a protector. She's very much a, though before we saw her kind of a selfish person, little girl who only cared about her own self and her love with Tanis. With her work with Elistan and things like that, you really see that she is for the people, and that she's really come to care about all of the people in Tanis's group that she has now joined. And then we've got Kitiara, who dies defending herself, which we don't know too much about Kitiara, but we do kind of know about what Tanis has said about how she would never be like Laurana and work with Elistan, and that she would never care so much about other people, and that she's very much all about herself. And again, from what I know from other texts and from later in the story, which you will find a lot more about Kitiara, it does seem very fitting. But I think we have enough of that, as well as enough of seeing other people that we do know's true kind of natures portrayed here, that we can assume that that is Kitiara's true nature, is that she's going to fight for herself. And then Tanis, even though he doesn't die, is about to die, and the true nature of the matter is he is stuck between both women. That is very obviously like, yep, he doesn't know what to choose. It's like, here's his elven half calling to him, and he's got his human half calling to him, and they're both butting heads, because if he chooses one over the other, it's like, who is he? I think that's part of the main problem that he has two women, is because it shows the duality of his two natures, the two parts of his soul, and that it's kind of hard to pick one over the other because you're half and half. So how do you side with one side of yourself? And I think that that's his main problem. And even though we know that he has learned that he is in love with Laurana, and truly wants her, not Kitiara anymore, it's still hard because he still cares about Kitiara, and he still cares about his human half, and he still has a lot of human friends that he cares about. So the dual nature of his life is still clashing against each other. And then, of course, we've got Raistlin, which is more and more complicated. We're going to talk a little bit more about Raistlin in a second, but just to finish this off, we do have the fact that he becomes black-robed. He becomes strong and confident and not sickly at all. And we've got that fact that he knows that it's a dream, and this invisible mentor that he talks to. And we've got the fact that he leaves Caramon to die, saying that he doesn't need him anymore. And we've got him being the last man standing. So the true nature of that being very interesting to see if that is his true nature. Yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about Raistlin in a second, but I just wanted to talk about a little bit why I brought up this conversation and kind of took so many details of it. It's important because I feel like we're really getting an insight into these characters. It's really giving us a character development moment, as well as adds to the horror because we see how horrific it is to kind of be splayed out in this way. If that makes any sense. Kind of like when they're dying and showing their true selves, and so it's kind of like their heart and soul is being bled out, and that they died because of who they are. And so I feel like it's a really important moment, not only for the story, but also for the character development, for how we see the characters, for the insights that we get of the characters, and you're just like, man, that really hits home to who this person is, and that it's within all this horror. It's really a striking blow to the chest, especially for some of the characters than others. But it's just very important, I think, that the authors put this in and really showed the characters and who they are, and will give us new insights, new understanding, new questions as well for the coming story. And we're going to see how these insights into these characters lead us forward in the story. Alright, so let's talk now about Dream Raistlin. Oh, I feel like this is a huge topic. And yet at the same time, I don't totally know what to say. I continually think, I know I've mentioned this before, that the more I get to know Raistlin, the more you know about him, the more he doesn't make sense, and you're confused, and you don't understand his character at all. That's how I always feel. I never know his motivations. I never really know what his goal is. You learn a little bit more in the test of the twins, but even then, it's almost like, why? He's very, very confusing. And I have read this story at least 5 or 6 times now. And that doesn't mean I remember everything, though. Don't remember every single detail. I remember that the dream ends with, pretty much everyone dying. I did remember that. But was anybody else thrown by the whole, I became a black-robed wizard to seemingly help my brother, which seems oddly out of character, and then help him survive the whole forest by using my black magic voodoo to keep all the elves away from him, only to dump him and say, I never needed you, never wanted you, good luck, sucker. And then lets him die. Just be like a punch to the gut in the end. I really forgot that he helps Caramon through the dream. I kind of vaguely remembered stuff about him becoming a black-robed wizard, but I didn't really remember him helping Caramon. And then I completely forgot the fact that he, dumps him and is like, yeah, you're good for nothing, and I'm going to be like I always was supposed to be, a full person, because you're not needed anymore. And I basically, he fed off your energy, I think is what he's saying, because they talk about how he keeps getting stronger and stronger while Caramon got weaker and weaker. And just dumps him for him to die, and is like, good luck in your afterlife, see ya! It really was, at first I was like, Raistlin's helping Caramon? The world is exploding? And then I'm like, oh, well, should have seen that coming. What was I thinking? It really was a little bit of a sucker punch to the gut, just as I'm sure it was for Caramon, even though Caramon is, again, I just mentioned how I don't get him and his obsession with his brother. I don't get how you could be treated that badly and still care and still love your brother. Now, there's a whole discussion I would love to have on this little moment. And I am 99% sure, like I said, because I've read so much more story, I know things that, and I don't always remember if it's in the story or not. I'm 99% sure that you learn about certain things in this story. And so I believe that later in later episodes, possibly not till book 3, we will be able to have a discussion about this moment again, and it will relate to the topic that we learn about later. But if any of you watching have seen, have read the books all the way through, or have read the Test of the Twins, and know about what happens in the Tower of High Sorcery that at this point we don't know about, I really would like to have a conversation with you about this at this time, because this point of what happens here connects to the Tower of High Sorcery, and it really reminded me about that information. And yeah, so I would really love to talk about this, but I don't want to ruin anything for people who haven't read the book yet. So again, anybody who has and wants to talk to me about the topic, how this relates to the Tower of High Sorcery at this time, go ahead and let me know, because I would really love to rant about it. As for those who haven't, we will go ahead and talk and revisit this discussion later. And we can go ahead and talk about it in depth and compare the two things, the two portions, this portion and the Tower of High Sorcery information, when we get to that. So, like I said, anybody who wants to talk about it now, go ahead and message me below. And I would love to chat with you. And for those of you who haven't, we will revisit and reconvene on this moment at a later date. And we will, when we have all the information, and we can go ahead and talk about what I wanted to talk about right now. All right. Next thing is kind of going back to his true nature, about his robes. So we don't really know who that invisible mentor thing was. I don't think it was the voice that normally talks to him, because it seemed like it was somebody he'd already talked to previously, and they had made a deal before. Some kind of deal, we don't know. It said something about how their bargain was still in place, is what he mentions. So it doesn't seem like it would be the voice, because the voice, a lot of times he mentions how he doesn't know who the voice is, and he's just heard it before, and it comes up at random times. So I'm not sure who it is at this time either. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe it is that voice, but I don't think so. Didn't seem like it. Did it seem like that to you? But my thing is that if his true nature is to be a black-robed, evil wizard, why does he wear the red robes? It's an interesting thing that he would be able to make some kind of bargain or whatever it is to be strong in this dream, and wear the red robe. So it's like, why did he not make the bargain to originally be black-robed if it gives him the power that was in this dream? I know, like, this isn't much of a discussion of like, oh, like, you know, let's talk about how this is important, these are the answers, but Raistlin very much doesn't have answers at this point, and I don't really feel like ever. So let me know what you think. I would love to have a discussion about this as well, which I know I say that for a lot of things, but I really do just want to talk and have you learn from me and me learn from you, and to just enjoy discussing theories on fantasy novels that are amazing. So the whole point, though, I feel like is really just to see Raistlin through these books, because he is kind of the wild card in this story, all the way through so far. He's the one that is the character that you don't know what to expect from him. You don't really know his motivations very well. You don't know what he's going to do. You don't know why he does anything. Sometimes even he doesn't know why he's doing things. And so he's the wild card where it's just like, what's going to happen? What's he going to do next? What is he after? And so that's why we kind of focus on him a little bit more sometimes, especially lately, because he's had so many ominous things that he has said, so many things that he has done, so many times that he has saved people, and yet when push comes to shove, he leaves everyone to die. So you really don't know what you're going to get with him. And so I feel like he is kind of the linchpin. Maybe that's not right. I'm not exactly sure what he would be exactly, but it's kind of a central figure, just as central as Tanis, because as Tanis is steady and wants to do the right thing and is trying to lead people and trying to do good things, Raistlin is as unsteady as Tanis is steady. He's all over the place. He really, a lot of things depend on whether he decides he wants to do something or not. Oh, are we going to survive this? Oh, well, I guess it'll depend on whether Raistlin's going to help us or not. And in this case, with this dream, he doesn't. He doesn't help anybody. He doesn't defend anybody. All he does in the dream is points out to Tika that she killed Flint. That's helpful. Leaves Caramon to die and basically tells him that I never wanted you as a brother because you stopped me from being a whole person. Okay, chuck you out of the way. That's helpful. He did tell Tanis that it was a dream, but that's about all he said. He said, oh, well, you can believe me or not. You can do whatever you want or not. Good luck not dying. See ya. That's helpful. And we don't know what happens at the end with the dragon. That's the one thing that we didn't really see, because Tanis passes out before then, and that's where the person we're seeing their point of view from. So, yes, it's kind of like stuff is everywhere with Raistlin, and I think that's why it's important to discuss him and to think about him and to try and keep him in mind, those kind of things, is because he is so central to the story and the success or failure of a lot of things. Like I said, he is as unsteady as Tanis is steady, and they are both kind of... Tanis is the leader, but he really has a lot of decisions that he makes based on Raistlin's counsel. So I feel like he is a very central figure in this story and in this group and in the success of the adventure and things like that. So I do want to... I know, like, we're not going to really go into detail with it because, like we said, it's kind of unsure about him, but there's something that I really wanted to read from him, and it's when he tells Tanis about it being a dream. Just because, just as always, Raistlin's moments of when he talks is always very... It really hits ya. Let's see. We must walk the way of death, for every hideous creature ever conceived in the twisted, tortured dreams of mortals will arise to stop us. But know this, we walk in a dream, Lorac's dream, nightmare, and our own nightmares as well. Visions of the future can arise to help us or hinder. Remember that though our bodies are awake, our minds sleep. Death exists only in our minds unless we believe otherwise. Then why can't we wake up? Tanis demanded angrily. Because Lorac's belief in the dream is too strong and your belief too weak. When you are firmly convinced beyond doubt that this is a dream, you will return to reality. If this is true, Tanis said, and you're convinced it is a dream, why don't you awaken? Perhaps, Raistlin said, smiling. I choose not to. I don't understand, Tanis cried in bitter frustration. You will, Raistlin predicted grimly, or you will die, in which case it won't matter. I will say that I love and hate Raistlin so much. Like, he is a really cool character with a lot of cool lines and a lot of cool things happening, but sometimes I'm just like, you are a terrible person. Don't even care. And you're just like, yay, like... It does always seem like Raistlin's actions change things or have a greater impact than most of the characters, so he's really important to keep in mind and to see how things go with him, because, like, for example, this whole dream could have been a lot differently if he had chosen to help his people, fellow companions out. Pardon me. Alright, let's go ahead and do the nitty-gritty really quick. And just, these are always the things that I just think we're just going to go ahead and touch on. Things that are very specific, that we should keep in mind, and then as we go along we can maybe touch on them in bigger detail if we need to, but they're always important, I feel like, to at least have been mentioned. So the first thing I thought was interesting that we should keep in mind is that Strum isn't actually a knight. The other knights mention that he has not actually been officially knighted and that he is still being looked at for the possibility of becoming a knight. And he's led his companions to believe that he is a knight. So let's keep that in mind. The second thing is Alhana giving Strum the Star Jewel, as well as its purpose, is that their souls are connected and that it was supposed to be for lovers who were not together. So even though Alhana is very prejudiced and she afterward is very angry and is very against Strum and saying she never wished she had never met him, never given it to him or anything like that, but she still did give it to him, and she did have a moment of sadness over not knowing him more. So let's see how that develops. Then we've got the Tower of High Sorcery, which I know I kind of already said that like it relates to something that happened with Caramon and Raistlin, but at this point it is important because it keeps being mentioned, and it keeps being mentioned that we don't know what happened to Raistlin or Caramon when they were there and he took his test. So because it's being mentioned so often, because it's such a mysterious thing, it's always important to keep those kind of things in mind, especially when that's how Raistlin got his power and his knowledge and a lot of the stuff that's happening right now. So it's such a big part of his character. So we really need to keep that in mind. As well as, I just wanted to mention that this was our first real glimpse of Kitiara. What did you think of her? And I know for sure, and I'm sure you already have guessed, that we will see more of her later. But what did you think of her, of your first glimpse of Kitiara in this section? Let me know down below if you had any special thoughts or concerns or first impressions of her at this point. Were you surprised that she was even in the section, since she hasn't been in the whole first book? Let me know. Alright, we made it to the end of the class. Thanks for sticking with me and having this discussion. I really enjoyed it, and these chapters I felt like were full of a lot of stuff to talk about. So again, if there's anything more you want to discuss, if there's anything that I did discuss that you'd like to discuss more, any questions, comments, concerns, anything of anything, go ahead and comment down below. I would love to hear about it. For next week, we are going to be reading chapters 11 through 3, because this story doesn't have quite so long of a book 1. It's already just about done. There's only 2 more sections for this book 1 portion of the second book, and we'll be going on to the second portion, which is book 2. And we'll be able to go ahead and discuss like 2 different images that are of course labeled as book 1 and book 2, and see how it applied to the first section, and see what the symbol that it gives us for the second section, what we think about that in the next chapter. Next video. So, yep, there's going to be pages 120 through 185, at least based off of my novel. So, I hope that you enjoyed this class, and I will see you next time. Bye!